Hello, welcome to our channel. It's Raphael, and today I'm going to talk about a couple different things. One, towards the end, I'm going to talk about failure and what it really means. I also will talk a little bit about the 4th of July and Independence because it's the 4th of July. And as in 3 days, it marks the anniversary of my late teacher, Taba Sensei, passing. I'm going to talk a little bit about him. In fact, I'm going to start with him first. Many of you have heard me talk about him a couple times, and one of the big things that I always mention is that he was the type of person who made you feel special. He didn't hold back on his teaching either. He would actually teach you as much as he could, and pretty much he would teach you as much as he could until your body gave out. And that's how he did. That's how it was with me. Now, I only trained under him for 4 months. I was there 1 month, I was there another month, I was there another month, and finally I was with my last month with them. Now, the first time I went, my trip overlapped with the person who introduced me to Taba Sensei. And it was a gentleman named Partlo Sensei, who actually was my gateway to Taba Sensei. And like I said, I was there for a month. Tony had been there for a while before me, and we overlapped for 2 weeks. I was actually expecting that once my training with Taba Sensei was over, I would have to find someone else to train with. And the person I trained with in California had given me was going to give me letters of recommendation, I should say, to meet people in other organizations in Matsubashi-ryu. And I never got those letters of introduction. Instead, I trained with Taba Sensei for 2 weeks, and towards the end of the second week, I was starting to grow worried about, okay, what am I going to do? And I figure, okay, well, I'm going to see where I can go, talk to whoever I can who will point me in the direction of a dojo, and see who I can train with. Well, as we were dropping Tony off on the airport, through his friend Makino-san, Taba Sensei asked me who I was going to train with, and if I've had the letters of introduction. And I told him no, I hadn't gotten them yet. I figured I was just going to bounce around and try to find someone who would take me. To which Taba Sensei said, well, if you're always welcome to train with us, if you like, I will pick you up. And for the next 2 weeks, every day, Makino-san and Taba Sensei would pick me up, take me to one of the 2 dojos that Taba Sensei taught in. One was in Tokashiki's dojo, the other one was in Maeda Sensei's dojo. And so I would go to one dojo, then the other, and he would take me out, take me to see the island. And like I said, he really made you feel like someone important to him. Now, when my entire month with him was over, I actually asked how much I owed him, how much I should pay, how much I could give. And he had told me to give some for the dojo, and which I did, which was something like, I think it was $20, $30, I can't remember anymore. It wasn't anything really significant. And I kept on asking what I could do. And he said, don't worry about it, just train, enjoy the Okinawa, train. And at the end of my trip with him, my first trip, he comes to drop me off at the airport. And he tells me, and as I'm getting out and shaking his hand, he actually took me to coffee too. I forgot about that in the airport. And we're sitting there drinking coffee with Makino-san. And Makino-san translates something that Taba Sensei says. And what it was is, Taba Sensei has one thing he wants you to do for him. At this point, I was so grateful to a gentleman who had pretty much taken someone who didn't belong to his organization, who wasn't this high-ranking person, who was just another crazy karate bum who managed to go to Okinawa, who just happened to, be lucky enough to meet him. So I said anything. And he says, I want you to, when you go to the U.S., to teach real Okinawan karate. He then tells me, a lot of the stuff you're doing is the way it's done on mainland, but you're not doing it the way Okinawans do it. He told me how he had taught me how Okinawan karate was supposed to be done, and to spread that. I was so grateful to him that I didn't even think about it. I said, definitely, I will. And I did try to do that. Now, I went to visit him a couple more times, a couple more times while he was alive. And one of the times was after I had already obtained my black belt here in the U.S., and it was to tell him that I wanted officially to be one of his students, and as I was already there, I wanted to be officially part of his organization. To which he seemed happy, and this was actually the last time I was there, he asked me to fill out the dojo license. This was in January 2011. So those are the last dojo license Taba Sensei stamped himself, which were when he was still alive. If you're one of the people fortunate enough to have one of those, one of the dojo licenses when Taba Sensei was alive, you have my writing in your dojo, because I'm the one who actually wrote the ones January 2011. Now, as far as I know, outside of Okinawa, there's only 3 people who have a dojo license from Taba Sensei, and those are Jerry Pilon and Tony Partlow. Those are the 2. And I can't remember who the third one is. It's a gentleman in Australia, which I'm sorry if I can't remember. If you know who it is, please put it down as comments. As far as I know, most people who got dojo license while Taba Sensei was alive, who are not in Okinawa, well, you have my writing on your wall. Anyone who got it afterwards, you didn't get it through Taba Sensei, which isn't saying anything. It just means that you got it after he passed away. Now, one of the things that I actually do tell people is, if you look at those those were actually in January 2011. In July 7th of 2011, he passed away. And one of the things that happened is, I had actually gotten a message from a friend of mine telling me he was sick. When I called people from our organization to find out what was going on, I was told, no, he's fine. It was just a little scare. Everything's fine. Well, the people outside my organization knew more about it than people inside my organization, in part because I guess Taba Sensei didn't want a group of his students to flood Okinawa. The truth is, I think that there's many of us who, if we would have known Taba Sensei was sick, we would have been there on a plane that day. But that wasn't the case, and so it was in many ways one of my failures as a student. I didn't pay attention, and I should have. And like I said, I'm going to talk about failures a little later. Now, Taba Sensei was a unique person. You really, in your life, you're fortunate to meet people like him. And that's just something that, it is what it is. You're not going to find many people like Taba Sensei was in your lifetime. It's just the way it is. But the other thing I was going to talk about is the 4th of July. And again, a lot of times people look at the 4th of July and think of, these proud, brave men stood up with principles, morals, and never lost. And that's not actually the truth. If you think about it, you read some of the history, you find out that some of the battles in the Revolutionary War, pretty much the colonial military was completely just devastated in some of these battles. I mean, you think about it, it makes sense. You have the world's most powerful military at the time taking on a bunch of people who, yes, some of them were trained, but not all of them. And so, a lot of the battles they fought were not going to necessarily be won as these great victories. We also see that all the moral failures that actually happened. A lot of times, if you actually start reading the history, you see some really messed up things morally, because, we need to do, this is the enemy. They don't deserve to be even seen as human. And we see it we saw it, yes, in both sides. When every war you see that happen. But it is a failure. Eventually, yes, the U.S. Won their independence, and like some people say, the victor writes the history. And so we can people now can talk about how people were so honorable in the way they fought a war. Really, if we actually look at what happened historically and we read you find some stuff that wasn't really too honorable. One of the things I recommend is there's actually a mini-series of John Adams on HBO, which actually tries to be more realistic in showing how the Revolutionary War really was done, really was fought. Not just in the battlefield, but also behind the scenes. And how a lot of our presidents were not necessarily the great moral people that we would have liked them to be. And so I guess that's actually where I want to talk about my failures. So I'm actually going to confess a lot of things to you guys, and one of them is that I've had many failures. And depending on what you do with your failure really ends up becoming what you do with life. Now, if you think of martial arts, there's not one person who hasn't failed at martial arts. For instance, when you're actually doing certain techniques, sometimes you don't do the technique right and it doesn't work. Now, there's a couple different ways people can adjust to that. One is to actually think, well, I'm not failing. It's that I'm using the technique for the wrong thing. So you can actually modify and you can do the technique. Instead of doing it correct, you can do it wrong and make a ridiculous way to actually make it work. Another thing that can end up happening is we can take the technique and realize, well, it doesn't work for me, and some people just quit. It happens. People quit all the time in martial arts. The other thing we can do is we can take a technique and see, okay, if it doesn't work for me, what are other people doing? This is actually one of the things Taba Sensei always told me to do. Go see what other people are doing to see why a technique would work and why it wouldn't. Look at not just martial arts, but also sports to see how to do it properly. And so that's actually the thing, is if you actually use the failures in anything and try to determine what it is, why it failed, you actually can move up beyond and start doing better and better at stuff. Now, it's hard for people. It is an ego thing that ends up striking your head, where it's I failed. And you have to tell yourself, you failed. And then look at why you failed and how you failed. And, well, is it that you failed, or is it that something else? Is there another reason for it? And that's actually one of the big things, the nice things about martial arts is, in martial arts, it should really be honest. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You cannot make excuses for yourself or your technique. If you didn't train enough for it, that's one thing. If your technique doesn't work, that's another thing. If there's a lot of different things of failure within there. And the question is, what are you going to allow failure to do for you? In martial arts, if you want to move up, your failure should be a learning method. You failed. Now what? Okay, why did I fail? Was it me or the technique? If it was me, well, how do I make myself work better? If it was a technique, well then, how do I change the technique to make it work properly? That's actually what I mean. Now, when I say I've failed a lot of times people don't necessarily see your failures because they see the end result. I like to cook. And some of the things I've cooked, I'm pretty sure my girlfriend will vouch, come out just horrible. But you learn from that that experience of making something horrible, and you can actually modify it to make it better the next time. That's what I mean. It's, anything you actually fail at, you can try to figure out why. Sometimes it's, well, I didn't understand how to fix this properly. Another thing is, well, if it may be that certain flavors don't go together in cooking. And that's actually the big thing is, with failure, you can grow from it. With just winning, if all you win, that means that you're not moving up. Your failures are more important than your successes, because that's really how everyone learns. So I will sign off. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope this makes sense. And what I hope you can ask yourself is this: how do your failures really define you? And what I mean by that is, are you the person who allows failure to just overwhelm you, or do you decide, look, how do I make it better next time? How do I improve my life because of how I failed? And there's so many examples I could give of failure and wanting to give up, or failure and not giving up, or failure and giving up. The big thing is, until you quit, you really haven't failed, I guess, in many ways. So I'll sign off and hope you enjoy this. Have a nice day. Please, if any questions, write them in the bottom. If you want to know more about failures, I will tell you, I actually talk about a lot of my failures in Serious and the Rarest Things. And and off the rails. I'm a flawed person, so obviously I'll have a lot of failures. Hope you enjoy this and have a nice day.